I'm glad to be here to ask these nominees some questions. Top positions in the Department of Justice: Kristen Clarke to be Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division; Todd Kim to be Assistant Attorney General for Environment and Natural Resources. And I thank each of them because they both spent considerable time on the phone with me. One recently is Monday, and the other one a couple, 3 weeks ago, I guess. As I've said before, I hope that Judge Garland meant it when he said he wants to keep politics out of the Justice Department. I'd like to see a real commitment to do that from the nominees today. I don't want to see a return to the Holder days, but I worry about that being down the road. Just give you a recent example. The Justice Department has the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in its prestigious Office of Legal Counsel, and he was recently tweeting criticism of the Supreme Court's opinions, giving his views on Republican political prospects and voter integrity legislation. That's senior management in the departments, and it happens to be what's supposed to be the most apolitical division. So this person was moonlighting as a political pundit. I see that, and it makes me wonder about the judgment and impartiality of the Justice Department's political leadership. I hope that Judge Garland will get his house in order. We'll see if today's nominees agree with that assessment. So now turning to the nominees, and I think that, none of us mince words around the United States Senate. I know that Ms. Clarke knows that she's very controversial. That said, I do appreciate the conversation she and I had, and I want to commend her for being forthcoming with the committee. I don't doubt that Ms. Clarke is a capable attorney who is sincerely committed to progressive causes. What I'm going to want to see is whether she can put that partisan commitment aside and do the work of an apolitical civil rights enforcer. For example, just last summer, she wrote a piece called, quote, unquote, "I prosecuted police killings, defund the police, but be strategic," end quote. I'm sure that we'll hear the usual refrain today that nominees don't really mean it when they say defund the police, but the fact is, it was said. Is Ms. Clarke going to use her perch in the Civil Rights Division to strategically defund the police by other means? Ms. Clarke has taken positions on religious liberty that are, I believe, limited and potentially unfair to believers. Will she put these views aside and enforce the rights of believers to the extent mandated by the courts? Ms. Clarke is a strong believer in voting rights. So am I, but I'm also a strong believer in secure elections. So I think it's a legitimate question whether she continued to view efforts to secure our elections as voter suppression when she's in charge of enforcing our voter laws, particularly a voter suppression talked about now when we had such a historical turnout for both the loser of the election as well as the winner of the election. Like Ms. Gupta before her, Ms. Clarke has launched many personal attacks on federal judges, especially Kavanaugh. Chairman Durbin has in the past compared this practice to Senator Ashcroft and Sessions opposing judicial nominees. I happen to think it's a little bit different. Evaluating judicial nominees is part of our constitutional duty. I think it's different for litigators and aspiring government lawyers to go around attacking federal judges and doing it publicly. Questioning the integrity of judges and then eagerly appearing before them means that you either aren't looking out for your client's best interest or that you didn't really mean your attack to begin with. Now, I think Mr. Kim is a lot less controversial, nominated to run the Environment and Natural Resources Division. While it's still called that, he has a distinguished career as a courtroom advocate. I don't think I agree with him on much politically, but elections have consequences, and based on his record, I think he will enforce the rule of law in the Justice Department. I will say that some of the activities of the Justice Department implicating his division do concern me. At policy level, President Biden wants to shift its focus from enforcing laws as passed by this Congress to protecting so-called, quote-unquote, environmental justice. I don't think this is consistent with the depoliticalized Justice Department that Judge Garland promised us. So I hope Mr. Kim will push back on any instructions to go forward beyond what the law requires. The Biden Justice Department is also in an unprecedented practice of acceding to nationwide injunctions against environmental rules in lower courts. I think this is an attack on the rule of law and the Administrative Procedures Act. President Biden is entitled to change environmental rules consistent with statute, but he should do it through the rulemaking process and not through litigation tricks. I hope that Mr. Kim will push back on this as well. Regulation by California judge can become regulation by Texas judge before you know it. With that, I welcome the opportunity to ask questions.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. At this point,
my first question was going to be about defunding police, but you have addressed that already, but I think I would disagree with you whether or not you have advocated defunding police, so I'll go on to my second question. Now, you might think it's unfair to bring up something that you organized in law school, but yesterday there was a congresswoman who said things along the same line. At a conference that featured a number of speakers that called violent radicals, including numerous cop killers, political prisoners, and POWs. So I got the name of 3 cop killers, 2 in prison, 1 fleeing to Cuba, Assata Shakur, Tom Manning, Mumia Abu Jamal. My question to you is, do you consider them political prisoners?
No, I am not familiar with their cases. I've never worked on those matters. The conference that you're referring to, Senator, was organized by the late Dr. Manning Marable, who was the director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies. I was not the organizer of that conference, but I provided logistical support as a student at that time.
You have said, quote, it's time to restore both race and gender diversity to our federal courts. Yet, Democrats in the Senate consistently voted against President Trump's female and minority nominees, especially at the circuit court level. You also didn't support many of these nominees. So my question, pretty simple. When Democrats opposed minority or female nominees who were rated qualified by the ABA, were they being racist and sexist?
Thank you, Senator. Over the 4 years of President Trump's tenure, my organization only took positions on about 5 judicial nominees, 3 of them Supreme Court justices. I believe that race and gender diversity on our nation's court is an important priority and goal that we should work towards.
So is it possible in the same vein, then, for Republicans to oppose President Biden's nominees on ideological grounds without being racist or sexist?
I believe that this body has an incredibly important advise and consent role under the Constitution to vet nominees. We want nominees who are qualified, But we also want to work to ensure that the bench reflects the growing diversity of our country. People with disabilities, women, people of color, are all people who we should see reflected on our nation's federal courts.
Can I ask you to be specific, though? If Democrats can oppose it and not be racist or sexist, shouldn't you have the same standard for Republicans?
I do not view this work through a partisan lens, Senator. In looking at judicial nominees, I look at qualifications. I've spoken about the need for diversity, but I don't view these issues at all through a partisan lens, Senator.
In 2017, you tweeted an article by Judge William Pryor, who at that time was opposing a proposed court expansion plan. You said, quote, "The Senate should heed his call," end quote, and not expand the courts. Do you still oppose expanding the number of judges? If not, why not?
I understand that President Biden has convened a commission to look closely at these questions. I think that these are important questions that we should examine and look forward to seeing the results of that commission's work.
I believe, though, that the conversations you had indirectly with Pryor did not deal with the number of Supreme Court judges or packing the court, but with lower court judges. So at that time, you seemed to say that we should not be expanding the number of lower court judges, and do you still hold that position?
Senator, I'd welcome more context. I'm not recalling the context in which that statement was made, but I do understand that President Biden has convened a commission to look very broadly at the status of the federal judiciary, and I look forward to seeing the results of that commission's work.
I got 9 seconds for my last question. During Bill Barr's confirmation hearing, you tweeted that Barr, quote, "must acknowledge that his work to promote mass incarceration destroyed communities and harmed people of color," end of quote. So, Joe Biden promoted the crime bill. So the person who nominated you to this position, did he destroy communities and harm people of color by authorizing and authoring and pushing the crime bill?
Well, the war on drugs, I think universally everyone agrees, led to the mass incarceration of people of color. And I think that broadly we've seen many people abandon those policies of the past. And I know that this body, the Senate, has engaged in robust thinking around more progressive criminal justice reform, including you, Senator Grassley. So I just want to acknowledge that some of the thinking of the past, I think, has been abandoned and is putting us on a more progressive path when it comes to race and incarceration in our country.
Thank you very much.
It was one of your more important legislative achievements, Senator Grassley.
You and I together. And
Senator Lee.
Senator Lee.